Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another Hollywood Memories with my favorite columnist, the other woman in my life, and that is Miss Beverly Washburn.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be with you.
Oh, it's always fun.
Wait, let me just start. We have something new and exciting. We are very proud to say that Hollywood Memories is now being sponsored by Carnegie Heights Active Senior Community in Henderson, Nevada. And out of all our different videos, that's the one they wanted. So they wanted to be with you.
Oh, thank you, Carnegie. That's so nice. Everybody there. It's a wonderful place, and I'm really happy to be associated with it.
Now that we got that out of the way, we're going to talk about somebody who was a superstar, really, and yet not many people remember who it is or who she was, and that was Loretta Young.
Loretta Young. Well, you have to be a certain age, I guess, because she was a huge star. Many years ago, she won an Oscar. She was nominated again. She, well, a lot of people that do remember her will remember that she had a love affair with Clark Gable.
And Spencer Tracy also got a piece of that action too, didn't he?
Yeah.
But you know what? Let's talk about her career.
Okay.
And the thing that I remembered as a child watching Loretta Young is that it was from the television. Mm-hmm. And she used to walk downstairs in a different gown.
Yes, she would come down in this beautiful gown and kind of twirl around. That was her little trademark.
That was her signature.
Yeah.
And every week she'd had a different gown.
Yeah. And you know, Dan, she was just one of the loveliest ladies. And I know you always tease me about, I always say, oh, everybody's wonderful. But I am blessed because I did get to work with some people that were just amazing. And a lot of the people that you work with, you'll do a show and then, you know, you have a nice rapport with them, but you don't necessarily see them again because everybody has their own life and you go on to other things. But Loretta Young and I stayed in touch up until the time she died. She was kind of like a second mother to me and a mentor.
Yeah. And what I didn't realize until I started doing research is that she had 2 TV shows, 2 separate ones. Let's talk about the first one, and then we'll go to the second one, because she did both. Right.
Well, the first one was actually called Letters to Loretta, and it was based on actual fan letters that people would write in, and then the screenwriters would take the letters and turn it into an episode. And then after a while, they decided just to do regular shows. So then they changed the name to The Loretta Young Show. And the first time I worked with her, I think I was about 8 or 9. And every week she would come down the stairs and twirl in her beautiful gown and introduce the episode. And it would always be, it was an episodic series. So it would always be a different story. Like one was called The Girl Scout Story. And then there was one called Big Little Lie. And another one was called Katie. And I played Katie. And so we just got along so well, and she was just so sweet to me. And so years later, she kind of retired, and then she decided to do another series, which was called The New Loretta Young Show.
Very original name. Yeah.
And in that one, she played a widow with 7 children. So she actually called me at home and said, I'm going to be doing a series, and I want you to be one of my daughters.
You know, and again, I think that's fantastic. Go back to the first TV show that she had. And under that show, how old were you then? About how old?
I think the first time I worked with her, I had to have been about 8 or 9. And I did about 4 or 5 different episodes with her.
Completely different episodes.
Yeah, playing a different character, a different show.
And when you spoke to her, did you say, hey, Loretta, what's going on? Or how did you address it? I mean, she was this glamorous person.
Beautiful, absolutely a gorgeous woman, and both inside and out. And she didn't want to ever be called Loretta. Of course, I was brought up as a child, you know, not to call an adult by their first name anyway. But she didn't like to be called Loretta. She didn't like to be called Miss Young. She was married to a director at the time named Tom Lewis. So I always called her Mrs. Lewis. And then he passed away, and she remarried. She married Jean-Louis, who was a very famous designer. And so then we started calling her Mrs. Louis.
And other people on the set would also call her by that. No one ever called her Miss Young or Loretta.
No, she didn't like to be called Loretta or Miss Young. And she was very hands-on. Every episode that we would do, she was very involved. She would be in the wardrobe department, in the hair department, in the makeup department, just checking everything because she wanted it to run really smoothly. And of course, everybody has a job to do, and she would let them do it, but she'd always want to put her little final touches on it.
And wasn't that a little bit different? Because back then, women really didn't take charge.
Right.
But
it was her own show, and she wanted it to be just the way she wanted it. And as I said, she played a widow with 7 children.
And that was the second one, though.
That was the new Loretta Young show.
Now, you go from the first one, in which you did 4 or 5 different episodes, and then years later, she calls you up. How does that happen?
Well, I was with William Morris at the time, the agent. And so apparently she contacted William Morris to get my phone number, and she called me at home. And it was just such a thrill. And at that time, I was 19. And so we did the series, but it was short-lived because we were opposite a TV show called Ben Casey with Vince Edwards. And that was like all the rage back then. And so our ratings were very poor. And so the series only lasted 1 season, but now it's out on DVD, and her son, Chris, took the series and changed the name to Christine's Children. And so it's available on DVD.
Well, did you find it difficult going from, let's say, the first one, in which you played a different character in a completely different segment, and now you're playing a character? And tell us a little bit about that character.
Well, I played the homely intellectual one. Yeah. And we have some pictures here. They at the time I was blonde, and they darkened my hair and they put on fake glasses, and my clothes were always in the wardrobe department. We would be very plain. Where the sisters, one was played by Sandy Desher, and she played kind of the giddy teenager, and the other one was Carol Sides, who later became Cindy Carroll when she did a movie called Gidget Goes to Rome. There were several different Gidgets, and she was cast in that. And she was the one that had all the boyfriends and everything. And so in this show, I don't have any boyfriends. I don't really have friends because I'm the studious one. So each week, they would feature a different one of us, and we'd have our own little storyline. So the picture that we have is an episode where I win a contest and I go away. And when I come back, I walk in and I look completely different. I have my hair up and different glasses. And I tell them that I met a guy named Richard and that I have this boyfriend, which turns out to be a lie because I make it up because I want to fit in. And so in the show, she picks up the phone accidentally and hears me talking to nobody, because I'm pretending that I'm talking to my imaginary boyfriend. I know, it was sad. Kind of like today.
No, far from it. Did you enjoy working with Loretta Young? Let's start with that. I
absolutely loved her. She would invite us over to her house for dinner, and she was really like a second mother. And then years later, after she retired, she married Jean-Louis and moved to Palm Springs. And at the time, my husband had been diagnosed with cancer. And so she would do these lovely things. She would, we spoke every Sunday. She would either call me. She would either call me or I would call her. And she would do these really sweet things. Like one day I went to the mailbox and there was this little book on angels. And another time I went to the mailbox and she had sent me this beautiful crystal dove. And another time it was a scarf with a little note, just said, I was out shopping and I saw this, thought you might like to have it. And so she would do all these really sweet things. And I have a funny story about her. One time I was talking to her and I said, Mrs. Louis, you're such a legend and you're so beautiful and people love you so much and you haven't done anything in such a long time. Would you ever consider doing another movie?
Yeah.
And she said, honey, she said, I get scripts submitted to me almost on a daily basis. She said, but they're just not the storylines that I'm interested in. She said, there's too much violence and sex, and it's just not anything I would like to do. And I said, I understand. And she said, besides, I'm too old. I'm too tired and I'm too rich.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then she cracked herself up, which is really cute. So she had a cute sense of humor too, but I adored her.
Again, she was like one of the legends in movies and then also on TV. And yet you speak to the younger generation, they shake their head and say,
I know.
Who's Loretta Young?
It's sad. Well, if you Google her, you can find out for sure.
And and without a doubt, she was one of the good people.
Absolutely. She was just a kind, wonderful lady. Now, the two boys on the show, their real names were Orman and Norman.
Orman and Norman. Yeah.
And they were twins. And she met them in church. And they were the sweetest guys. And then they changed their names to Dirk and Dak, which sounded a little better stage name than Orman and Norman. And sadly, Orman, who was Dirk, he was killed in an automobile accident not too long after the series. And Dak went on to do quite a few things. He was in The Guns of Will Sonnet, a TV series. He was on Dallas. And sadly, he died of AIDS. But we stayed in touch up until...
Well, so then in the few seconds that we have left, I'm going to say Loretta Young, and you're going to describe her as...
Just a lovely, beautiful, kind woman who was just as pretty on the inside as she was on the outside.
And no matter how long we talk, you're not going to say anything bad about her.
Well, there's nothing bad to say about her. She was, I feel blessed that I knew her and that we had such a wonderful relationship. And the sad thing is, I do have one regret, is she invited my husband and me to come and stay at her guest house in Palm Springs. And it was one of those things, it wasn't that we didn't want to go, but you put things off and it was like, well, probably maybe next week, because my husband was starting not to feel really good, because he had cancer. And so we kind of put it off. And then sadly, I got the call that she had died. And it was a lesson learned that you shouldn't put things off because we're not promised tomorrow. And I wish that we had gone because I think how blessed I was to think that Loretta Young invited us to stay at her place.
But you just never called Loretta?
No.
Anyway, I thank you so much for allowing me to sit with you and drive you crazy.
No, I thank you for allowing me to share my memories, and thanks to all of you who tune in. It means a lot to us.
And again, I want to thank Carnegie Heights in Henderson, Nevada for sponsoring this.
Thank you.
And we'll have more. So we will see you again next time for Hollywood Memories. Dan Roberts and
Beverly Washburn. Thank you.
See you again.